So I wanted to talk for a little while about the difference between intelligence and wisdom, so far as I've managed to delineate between the two during the course of my having thought about this. And I'm doing this video in response to something that Jordan Peterson said. He said, oh, intelligence and wisdom, they're not the same thing at all. They're not remotely the same thing. They're very, very different. And I think when it comes to intelligence, this is something we have very much down. Intelligence is the ability to apply knowledge and skills. However, when it comes to wisdom, and also Jordan Peterson goes on to say that intelligence is very largely about speed and how fast you can arrive at the solutions to different problems. And he goes on about IQ being a good measure of intellect, which I'm actually doubtful of, and I'll get into the reasons why I'm doubtful of it during the course of this video, actually, when I talk about wisdom. And I think when it comes to wisdom, I think it's something that's far harder to define. I think it's something a little bit more amorphous and far more connected to the mystical elements of thinking, and far more connected possibly to religious elements of thinking and spiritual ways of thinking. And that wisdom, as opposed to intellect, which is something that we're born with, wisdom is something that can be cultivated throughout our lives, and that we can become wiser. We might not be able to become more intelligent, however we may be able to attain greater and greater levels of wisdom, I feel. And there's different ways of going about this. There's the sort of Eastern philosophical way of the sitting practice of meditation, for example, and the attempt to integrate, for instance, the Eightfold Path in Buddhism, or the Noble Truths of Buddhism, into our life, or to think upon the Noble Truths of life in the Buddhist tradition, and so on, and things like this. And all of this is supposed to lead to greater levels of wisdom. However, I wouldn't have said quite so much that wisdom is something that can be delineated from intelligence. And I think that wisdom is something a little bit more mysterious, yes, that goes hand in hand with intellect, and is something more akin to understanding, possibly, or something more akin to consolidated intelligence and consolidated learning. And that when we have wisdom, it does follow from, yes, a long course of having practiced a certain discipline. For instance, it's not here at the moment, but I'm trying to learn the guitar at the moment, and I lack a lot of talent when it comes to learning the guitar. But eventually, if I were to practice enough, I would gain that ability and then consolidate that ability, and then have attained wisdom, possibly, or having attained higher and higher degrees of skill at playing the guitar. And yeah, I think it is very much something that is attainable, whereas intellect, I get far more the impression that it's something that we're born with or not. It's like an innate thing within us. We have certain levels of processing power, different levels of mental capacity, let's say, when it comes to the application of skill and knowledge. And wisdom, I think, who do you think of who's really wise? You think of wise old men, right? And you think that it must come following a great deal of learning, a great deal of experience, and it follows from, the conscious attempt to improve oneself, the conscious attempt to build upon one's levels of understanding and knowledge and skill, and that we eventually grow to become wise rather than being born wise. And I do know you get this idea of like wise children, or children who say things which seem quite deep and meaningful, but I don't know so much about that. I think, yeah, maybe they can have a degree of wisdom, sure, but I really think more than anything it comes following from many, many years of deep learning and deep thinking, and the cultivation of knowledge and the cultivation of understanding. So, and when it comes to intellect also, we harp on about intelligence, I think, far too much, and we speak less of wisdom and understanding and things like this. And I think I'd like to conflate wisdom with understanding. Something like that. I think that's a reasonable conflation to make. and we harp on about intelligence, 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 and who can do the best on tests, and who gets into the best university, and this, that, and the other, who gets the highest grade on their degree or their high school diploma or their A levels or whatever it happens to be, and we neglect the deeper, more esoteric, more mystical spheres within which we, I think that wisdom more than intelligence operates. So it's a tricky conundrum because they are obviously linked. Intellect and wisdom are linked, but I would have said that intellect is something actually to be discouraged and that wisdom is to be encouraged, since I think intellect amounts to something a lot more like raw processing power, uncultivated wisdom, or wisdom that's sort of yet to become wisdom, a sort of a nascent phase of wisdom, if you like, the phase before which we've attained understanding, and before which is the raw material for wisdom, if you like. I think that's what intellect really amounts to. And you have this idea of being an intellectual, or being part of the intelligentsia, and so on. And I think you can almost use that sort of term in a derisory fashion. And you needn't really employ terms like pseudo-intellectual so much, since I think being called an intellectual might be a bad enough thing. Frankly, I don't want to be referred to as an intellectual ever. I want to be referred to as a wise man. That would be nice. That's Samwise. I'm actually becoming a gardener as well, which is interesting. But that's on a different sort of tangent, let's say. But no, when it comes to wisdom, yeah, I think it amounts to a being cultivated, being someone possessed of understanding. And I think when it comes to, and we always think of it as being higher than intelligence, don't we? Wisdom, surely. We always think of it as being a greater and nobler thing to try and attain rather than intellect. Because if you're trying to attain intellect, well, you can't really do that because it's something you either have or you don't. It's something you're either born with or not. But the impression that I get from wisdom is that it's open to everyone, more or less. I think more or less everyone can be wise. But, you know, that follows, of course, from the very, very rigorous and difficult process of trying to attain it, and trying to put into practice the principles by which people may become wise, and may become cultivated, may become understanding of the world, their own minds, consciousness, other people, society at large, the natural world, and so on and so on, and everything that comprises the way that we think about the world. So I suppose being a wise man is something akin to being a sort of polymath, isn't it? And a polymath, I think that's a great thing to try and be, if you can truly be one nowadays, and if you can truly accumulate understanding within a variety of different fields of human learning. I think that's a very, very noble ambition. And it probably does lead to wisdom, I'd have said. I think you'll gain some wisdom out of the attempt to do so. Having attempted to do that myself, I think. In my reading and so on. Although it's mainly been in physics and philosophy and other things. So yes, distinction between wisdom and intellect, to summarise, I don't think there is one really, yet there is one. Intelligence is the nascent phase of wisdom. Intelligence is wisdom that is yet to be properly manufactured, properly honed and refined, properly cultivated, and properly integrated into one's life. I think that's roughly speaking what wisdom is. So thank you everyone for watching. This has been a great little endeavour, I feel. And yes, I hope you become wise in your life. And I hope I become wise in mine as well. So thank you everyone for watching. Bye bye bye. Love you lots.